and welcome along to another episode of My Football Story from the Honest Football Podcast. This week I speak to former professional footballer Mark O'Brien, who recently retired this summer, to talk through his illustrious career in the game. Mark started as a young player brought over from the Republic of Ireland to play in the Derby Youth Academy, but was very quickly elevated to first team level. Mark then played for my beloved Luton Town, and we talk about a possibly quite frustrating period in his career there, which included loan spells away at Southport in non-league football, before an opportunity to move to Newport County, where he probably became best known. He captained the side at Wembley in a League Two playoff final, as well as being involved in some magical FA Cup nights for Newport. Mark certainly made Newport County a home from home, and he talks very fondly about his time at the club and the help that they're still giving him now after he's retired due to a recurrence of his heart valve issue. We can't thank Mark enough for giving up his time. We hope you enjoy his story. If you do, please put a thumbs up on the video, subscribe down below for regular content from the podcast. But this is Mark O'Brien's football story, and we really hope you enjoy it. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark now. And it's quite an interesting story, so I'm looking forward to talking to you on this one. And obviously you're a former Luton player, which is dear to my heart. But I want to start, as we always do with former pros, by talking about your first footballing memory, whether it's the first time you kicked a ball, the first game you watched on TV. What's the first thing you remember about the game?
The first thing I remember would have been, I was 6 years old, and my brother was always 2 years older than me. And I remember he was playing for a local side, Cherry Orchard. And I always used to mess around with a football, or I used to do loads of different things. So they never knew football would have been for me. But I remember I went up to train with the under eights, and I was only 6. So my dad said, "Go on up and train, but tell them that you're only 6 years old. You're not going to sign." So I didn't know if I would have been good or not. And so I ended up training with the under eights. And when I trained with them afterwards, they spoke to me dad and they were like, "Oh yeah, we'd really like him to play for us." My dad was like, "No, he's too young." But then from there on in, Man U winning the treble, because I'm still a Man U fan, but Man U winning the treble and stuff like that, and seeing all that kind of glory that they had and stuff, I was crazy into me football then. And like I said, it was always just a dream of mine just to want to be a footballer then.
Perfect. And I guess talking live, do you remember the first game you went to at a stadium?
It was only local, St. Patrick's Athletic, which is only down the road from me in the League of Ireland. That was one of my first games that I kind of ever went to. I didn't go to Old Trafford till I was 13, 14.
Yeah.
And when I went there, loved every minute of it. They were playing Birmingham. At home, and like I say, it was brilliant just to go watch and be in one of these massive stadiums.
And talking about your youth career, you mentioned playing locally at under eights. The bit that we always find the most interesting, and we've talked to a lot of players from Northern and the Republic of Ireland, is going from playing local youth football to getting that move into an English academy. So talk us through your youth career and how the sort of move to England came about as you progressed.
In Ireland, it's different to what England is, because obviously Sunday League in England is normally not as competitive.
Yeah.
They see it as you're playing with your mates, which in Ireland it is similar to that, but also from younger ages it's actually really competitive.
Yeah.
So you always have that kind of competitive edge, and you always have that side to you where you want to win. And even from a young age, it's always that you want to win leagues, and you play cup games in Ireland and you want to win them. From the youth sides, with Cherry Orchard that I played with for 10 years, when you get to around 13, 14, you start being able to be eligible to go out on trial to English sides. So English sides can come to a Sunday League game or whatever, and they can just pick a player from there right into the club and say, "We want him to come over on trial." And that's how it all comes around. And then when you're 14, 15, you start making it into the young Ireland teams and all the young international squads and stuff like that. So from a young age, when you're over there, everything is always real competitive, which obviously puts you in good stead for when you come away to England. The only difference that you have to kind of get used to is you're training every single day. This is now your job. It's not train twice a week, playing a Saturday, and you go to school the rest of the days. This is every single day training. So that's the only kind the physical aspect of it is probably the tough part of moving away. But it's tough for Irish players, I always find at times, because you're never told enough for when you go away to how difficult it actually is. You think right, I've made me dream, it's going to be amazing. But then the sacrifices of, you don't get home to see your friends or family quite as often as you want. You don't get to enjoy birthdays, Christmases, New Year's as often as you want. So like it does become difficult. Like I loved like every single year playing back for Cherry Orchard in Ireland and stuff like that. And but once I had my chance of flying away, like I went on trial to Blackburn 4 times, and I was so close to signing for Blackburn. But then Derby came in last minute, and when I flew there, it felt like a home from home situation. And obviously, when I felt more comfortable there, I thought, I want to sign here. This is the place for me. But like also, like I was on trial at Liverpool and Manchester City as well. It was great to say I was on trial there, but also there was like 40 kids in one academy. Like when they try and tell you you could be the next to be for Man City, like you know you're up against 40 other kids, whereas at Derby you have probably a bit more of a realistic chance where you go into an academy side. If they sign you, they're signing you because they want you, because obviously they wouldn't have the funds to what the likes of Liverpool or Manchester City would have had. So when I went there, like I say, I was lucky enough to start my scholarship. Well, I didn't start my scholarship till the following year, so I was only a schoolboy when I first signed at 15. And like I said, I was lucky enough by at the end of that year, I made my debut. So it kind of worked out perfect.
I was going to say, once you got to Derby, it all started happening pretty quickly for you compared to some of the others we've spoken to. But the one thing I want to ask, and you touched on it there, is so many of the players that go over talk about the potential side of being homesick, of not really having anyone that grew up in the same sort of way as you, because they're all from different countries, mostly from England, obviously. And as you say, the Irish youth football's so different. So did you suffer with that as well?
The love of football for me overshadowed the homesickness.
Yeah.
So like I was just loving every minute of training every day, and this was my job, and loved every bit of it. But I do understand where, like, I've come across a lot of Irish players, and I come across English lads as well when I was in the youth system, and they were like 2-3 hours away from home.
Yeah.
But like they could go home every weekend, where those us Irish lads were there 7 days a week, and then we could only go home maybe on an Easter break, or if the youth side had time off over Christmas, you might get time off and stuff like that, which for me, in a good way and also bad way, I was involved with the first team from the age of 16. So I never had Christmases off from a young age. So like I've just been used to that. But homesickness is probably one of the main parts of like Irish players flying away, because it's like you don't see your friends every single day. You can't like go out to train and then afterwards you like hang around with your friends. You don't see your family as often. Everything's through a phone call. You see your family once a month, maybe, or maybe even less. So that's what people find really difficult. And then all of a sudden, the training aspect every single day, going from training twice a week with like your Sunday league side, to then all of a sudden you're training every single day at a high level. And then all of a sudden your diet comes into it. You can't just eat what you want when you want. So like there's so many more things to it that you kind of have to pick up quickly as you go along, rather than you get told before you go away, right, this is going to be really hard. Because you think the minute you get a chance of going away, straight away in your head you're thinking, I made it. But like that's only the beginning. So when you realize this is only the beginning, and then there's so much more to it, you need like your love for football to kind of take over and switch your mind positively, rather than, if you suffer with homesickness, the only way is that it's going to be difficult to try and get you and snap yourself out of that.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so honest with that. It's a story that a lot of Irish players have come across, and some have obviously it's been an issue for them, and others have obviously, like yourself, had that distraction of the first team quite quickly. So let's talk about how you got there, because how quickly, when you got into that Derby youth setup, did you know you were going to have a chance at the first team? Because it seemed to happen almost instantly.
One of the reasons I signed there was because they were very keen and eager to sign me. Like they really wanted me. So to have that feeling of someone wanting you, made it that bit easier to want to sign for Derby. And obviously it's a massive club as well. But at the time when like you have the likes of Blackburn who were in the Premier League wanting to sign you, people are like, oh, well, he won't want to go to Derby because Blackburn's the more appealing. But to me, I was always, wherever I was more comfortable and felt more at home, that's what made me relax more. And when I flew away and you knew that they really wanted me and you knew that they were happy to have me there, like I was only 15, like I say, when I went away. So I was training with the youth side under 18s every day. But because I wasn't registered until I turned 16, I was playing with the under 16s on the weekend. So I was kind of still, I was getting the development in, but still not allowed to play with the under 18s or the youth side until I turned 16. So once I turned 16 in that November, I started playing more youth team games. And then once I started playing more youth team games, I was doing okay. And it was just after the new year one of the second year scholars, and I was only obviously just registered, so I was still a schoolboy.
Yeah.
But one of the second year scholars at the time was meant to be playing with the reserves. But then he ended up coming down ill or injured or whatever the day of the game. So they picked me out and said, right, we want you to be on the bench for the reserves. So like for me, I'm thinking, oh, this is brilliant. This is great. But that reserve game, they were doing well. And then I came on for the last 10 minutes. And I remember I was just throwing myself around trying to block everything. And just, you don't think in your head, try and make an impression, but you just think like, I'm loving this. That 10 minutes, Nigel Clough, who was the manager at the time, like was impressed enough to say, right, you're on the bench for the reserves again. And now I could get 30 minutes. And then that kind of all just snowballed into then playing with the youth side, having a couple of reserve games. And then by the end of that season, the first time I think we're playing Doncaster at home, second last day of the season. And if they got a result, they were safe in the league. So then the last day of the season was a free game. So I remember my mum and dad were over, we were playing Sheffield United in the youth team. So as I was playing the game in the youth side, Nigel Clough was standing on the top of the hill and he was speaking with me man dad. So as he was talking with them, like didn't know what was being said and all that kind of stuff. So went to the first team game and Derby 1-2-1. So then when I came out of the game, like I said to me man dad, last day of the season next week, so I'll be home the following week. I'll see you like in 2 weeks' time or whatever. And my dad goes, no, I'll see you next week. And I looked at him and goes, what are you coming over next week for? He said, Nigel Clough was speaking to me up on the hill and he said, if they get a result today, you're on the bench for the first team next week. So I thought that was me dad, like kind of winding me up.
Yeah.
So I was like, nah, you're joking with me and all that. And he was like, no, he said, I'll see you next week. And I was like, nah, I don't believe you. So then we went in training on the Monday, that like the last week of the season. And as I'm in like obviously the youth change around, put my boots on, the first team coach walks in, OB, you're with us today. And straight away, like kind of your face goes pale and you start thinking, this actually isn't happening. But then the one thing that like even I look back at now and what people and managers have told me, the one thing that stood out for me at a young age, I was always great at talking during football. Like even if I was playing with men or playing with my youth side, like I'd be screaming at people, tuck in, push on, do this, watch your shoulder, and like being good at communicating. But then off the field, I wouldn't speak to anybody. And that's one thing that when I went down with the first team, they kind of respected me for, like, yeah, they were like, he's a 16-year-old, he's come down and he's trained really well and he talks really well. And that whole week I trained with the first team. And then obviously Clough was like, do you fancy the game at the weekend, Watford away? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And he was like, all right. He said, well, you're traveling. And I was like, oh, lovely. So going down on the bus, didn't speak a word to anybody. Like just sitting there, like, and you have Rob Holtz, Robbie Savage, Gary Teal, Stephen Boywater, like I'm like sitting there thinking, what am I doing on this like coach? Like I say, some of it is a bit like kind of hazy, but like the game kicked off and like it's 45 minutes in and Rob Holtz was playing centre back with Luan Nyatanga. So 45 minutes in, the lads were 3-0 down, and then at half time we come back out. I'm sitting on the bench and one of the lads sitting next to me looked over the coach's shoulder. Coming on after 60 minutes. And I looked and goes, nah, I'm not. And then I looked up at the board, there was like 57, 58 minutes gone. And he turned around and goes, oh, we get one. And I thought, oh my God. You go into autopilot, like I'm only 16. I didn't know how to warm up down a sideline. So I just jogged up and down and I didn't really know what to do. We were in front of a stadium of like 20,000. And from thing just went perfect. Like I won headers, I won tired one off the line and the game finished 3-1. So all of that in itself, I always just looked at and I thought like it went perfectly. But then, like you say, you go from one high of that and in the following season, you go for a heart operation and then it's like back to like ground zero again and you don't think you're going to have a career ever again. So it was great at the moment and I was lucky enough that I probably established myself so soon that gave me the platform to have trusted me to get back from the heart problems rather than if I was still in the youth side, you never know if you would have got given that time. So like I say, I was lucky enough and sometimes, like, and I've said it before, like if it wasn't for Nigel Clough, I don't think personally I would have had a career.
No, that's fair enough. And I appreciate your honesty on the emotions of the day because a lot of footballers try to make it out like they were ready and prepared for it. But must be a surprise to most people when you get that chance. So I wanted to move on very quickly because you mentioned the heart valve issue a year later. When you're establishing yourself at Derby and you're working into the first team and you're being involved in most of the match days, and then suddenly you think, as you mentioned, your dream might be taken from you just like that. How did that sort of affect you? And I guess it did sort of help that you were established already in terms of coming back. But at that moment, that must have been an emotion you probably couldn't describe.
The only way that I kind of am able to like recall it is saying I was lucky I was 16 to get that news, because I was still naive. The only question I asked the surgeon was, can I still play football? And they never gave me a definite positive answer. They just said, well, maybe you can, but need to be realistic. Maybe it won't happen for you. Maybe you won't get back to a professional standard. You can probably play down the park with your mates. But they always gave me that slight glimmer saying, well, you can, but we can't guarantee that it's ever going to happen for you. And I got told with the valve that got put in, it might last a year, it might last 5 years maximum. So in my head, I was thinking, right, I'm going to have a 5-year career. I'm going to just put everything in and see how it goes. So once I heard you can play football, I just thought in my head, oh, yeah, it's an injury. I'll get back. I'll be fine. And that played into my hand. And once Clough knew about it, he was phoning me every day, making sure I was doing me walking. He gave me a new 3.5-year deal because I made the debut at the end of that year. So he was showing his side of, right, we believe in you. We trust that you're going to get yourself back fit. And they put their trust in me to get back fit. So I knew I had to give back to them to try and give back to what they've trusted in me, kind of thing. And like I say, I had the operation that October, and then I made the first team bench at the end of May. And I got back playing in April. So everything seemed like a quick turnaround. But once I ended up going back onto the pitch, it was right back into football mode, and whatever happened 8 months ago, and it was completely forgotten about.
That's a brilliant mentality, and probably explains why you then had such a good professional career afterwards. But I want to take you through a few years forward now, because obviously you came back from that, you got into the first team again, you were doing well at Derby, and then, as you mentioned before, serious injury comes into it. So after getting over the first issues, how does it feel when the injury then takes away for nearly a year as well?
That was tougher than the heart issue, because obviously I had the taste of playing in a first team. And from the start of that season up until that Christmas, I played every single game for the first team. So I was already in the full flow and everything was going brilliant. People were speaking about me. I was getting called into Ireland under 21 squads, and I was doing things like that, and everything was going great. I remember we were playing West Ham away, and that's when I got dropped out of the team for Sean Barker, the club captain, to come back fit. And Nigel Clough's words to me were, well, you should be happy with what you've done. I bet you didn't expect to play as many games this season as you have. And I kind of looked at it in the right way and said, yeah, he's right. I probably didn't expect it, but at the same time wanted it. And then a couple of games over the Christmas period, we played Leeds at home and we won 3-1, and I came on the last 30 minutes in that game. So then because I only played 30 minutes, you have to train the next day. If it's less than 60 odd minutes, you train the next day. It's always been that. So I was in training the next day, and Clough called me into his office, and he was saying to me, I thought you done really well when you came on for that half an hour. I'm thinking about putting you back into the team and starting you next week. So I thought in my head, that's brilliant. I've worked myself back into the team. He goes, you've been training really well. So then you go out and do the training session, and then in the middle of a possession game, someone plays a ball to someone, and as I go to close down and he plays it away, all I done was go to turn, and you slip, and I feel my knee and the pain going through my knee, and you just think, oh no, what's this? But because I tore my ACL, the pain went away once I sat in the physio bed. So I sat in the physio bed, and I was like, maybe I overreacted, because I was punching the ground thinking, oh my God, I've broken my leg or something. And then the physio checked it and goes, that's your ACL. But I never heard of an ACL before, because I only moved away from Ireland. And I was like, all right, what's that? I said, is that a couple of weeks? And he goes, no, that's your season done. And I kind of looked at him, and like you say, everything kind of just felt like a big downer again. And it's Mark, he's injured again, and we're going to have to stick by him. So then you start thinking people are going to start judging you and be negative. But like I say, Clough again stuck by me, and he was brilliant and said it himself that we're looking forward for you to get back. You just get yourself right, and once you're right, you'll be back in here and you'll still be with us. And he showed all that trust in me for so many different ups and downs that the least I could do was just keep my head focused. And all I ever had in my head, even though ACLs are serious, the one thing I always kept telling myself was, well, if I can get back from a heart operation, I can get back from an ACL. And that's the only thing that kind of drove me, where I thought, right, if I can get back from that, I can do that. But the ACL was a lot more difficult because it's in your control in a way. The heart problems aren't in your control, so you have to take it whichever way it comes. Yeah. Whereas your knee is in your control, where you're thinking, oh, I wish this didn't happen. Or if I didn't go close that down, would it have happened another time? Or I was lucky enough, I had a great physio in like Neil Sullivan. I had like a good fitness coach in Steve Haynes at the time, and all people there all worked so well and so hard with me and got our heads down, and they done brilliant by me. And like I said, if Clough himself, I was lucky enough that he was still manager, because he was the one that kept showing his trust in me and gave me them opportunities to get back fit, whereas other managers might just overlook it and say, no, we need to get rid of him. He's injury prone, as certain people used to call it.
Yeah. Talking a bit later, coming back from the next injury with Derby, it led to an interesting moment in your career, which was going on loan to Scotland, to Motherwell. Now, we've had a couple of players who went on loan to Scotland when they were in their young ages, and they were always shocked by the physicality of the football in comparison to the English leagues. Now, was that the same for you, having come from the Irish background, or did you already experience some of it there? Because that league's traditionally quite physical as well.
I never went in thinking, oh, this is going to be less than what the English league is, and this isn't going to be a great standard. I knew it was going to be difficult, because once I went there, and Motherwell finished second in the league like a couple of years in a row, and I just thought to myself, like, this is a great opportunity. I get to play against Celtic, and I've never been to Celtic Park, being like Irish. I thought, this is brilliant. Once you go up there, you realise that the standard there is so much better than what people give it credit for, because it's so like overly powered by Celtic, Rangers. But you've got the likes of Aberdeen, you've got Motherwell, you've got Hearts, you've got Hibs, you've got all these teams that are like top teams.
Yeah.
And people don't expect the quality, as you say. Sometimes you see where you think England is the be all, and it's the main league that you have to be in. But in Scotland, like, it is a very, very good standard. And like I said, I loved every minute up there, met some great people, and it was like the beginning of new experiences, because all I ever knew was Derby before that.
And then after that, coming back from Motherwell led to you being released by Derby. So I guess my question, when you're first being released from a club for the first time in your career, is did you have any idea it was coming, or was it a surprise to you? Again, did it feel like the dream was over to an extent?
Not really, because the reason I went to Motherwell was because I went in and sat with Steve McLaren.
Yeah.
Because I knew Motherwell came in, and I went in to speak with Steve McLaren, saying, like, if I go to Scotland, like, should I stay here and fight for my place, or if I go there and get experience, will I come back and have an opportunity? Well, he said, in the direction we're moving, I best you move on. And I kind of looked at him and thought to myself, like, I've only come in here for the conversation of saying, should I go out on loan and will I come back to your team? I said, I didn't know, like, this is a conversation to say I'm, like, not needed anymore. But then I look back at it now and say, I respect his honesty, because there are managers out there that will hold on to you and sell you the dream.
Yeah.
Whereas he was totally honest with me. So I knew me going to Motherwell was the end of Derby to try and start something new for myself. So I wasn't really that shocked knowing when Derby were releasing me and I wasn't getting a new contract. I knew that, like, that was coming in anyway. So that's why I tried just to do as well as I could at Motherwell. Maybe I can catch someone else's eye, which luckily at the time I caught John Still's eye, who went up to watch Steve O'Donnell against when they played Motherwell, and had a call from him in the summer, and then that's how, like, Luton came around.
Moving on to Luton, obviously. I am a fan, but I'll keep it brief because I know it isn't the most, or it wasn't the biggest part of your career, should we say. So I'll try and be as impartial as possible. But how did you find a spell at Luton? Because it must have been quite frustrating, because you were injured quite often, unfortunately, and it probably hampered your progress to the first team. And you were joining a team on the up, but then there was a managerial change quite quickly as well. So what was that spell like for you? Because it just seemed like a bit of a chaotic time, really.
I went in on trial and everything was going great. So many names coming in, Paddy McCourt, a lot. And I was more than happy to go play for Luton. And like, I was happy to be there, and I wanted to play and wanted to get myself going again. And everything was kind of going in the right direction. I was kind of in and out of the team because we had such a massive squad then. I was in for 1 or 2 league games. Then I played in the cup game against Stoke, and John Still was always rotating it. So, like, I never really minded that, because I was still getting, like, kind of the game time in there to kind of still be involved. But sometimes it's funny when you say I had a lot of injuries, because from the outside looking in, it would have looked like I had a lot of injuries at Luton. But when the managerial side changed over from John Still to Nathan Jones, that's when things kind of took a dip. In the best way possible, it was one of those moments in football where you start realising football is only a business, where I was lucky to have Nigel Clough, who was so loyal and would stick by you and give you the time and give you your chances. And if you were injured, you can get back fit and give you a chance again to see if you can keep on playing. Whereas when Nathan Jones came in, he had an idea, he had a mindset, he knew what he wanted. And because I was a John Still player, I think out of everyone, I was the only one that never played a single minute under him. Because you look at the centre-backs that played, who were the John Still signing, Magnus Okungai, Scott Cuthbert, all these people who came in under John Still, Craig McHale-Smith, Jack Marriott, all these people all got minutes under him, and I was just pushed to the side. And if that's just me personally not being the player he wants me to be, well then I always said, tell me. And that's all I ever wanted was honesty. When that season kind of went on and then I ended up having to go out on loan to Southport for a month, I remember Nathan Jones phoned me. He said, go out on loan for a month, get some game time, get some games and get your fitness up or whatever, and then get to come back. So I went on loan, played 7 games in a month for Southport, and I thought, this is brilliant. Like 7 games in a month, like I'm fit, ready to go. Like I done really well, scored a goal, everything went really well at Southport for me. And Dino Maria at the time was the manager. So once I came back, I remember it was Carlisle away. Alan Sheen was injured at the time. Scott Cuthbert was struggling, and someone else was injured at the time. So I thought, right, if anything, I might have a chance of being on the bench here, if not play, because I went out, got the games that he said I should get. So then I was travelling in the travelling squad. And then when the team came out, I was 19th man. And they put Frankie Masunda on the bench, which I had no problem with. But I said it in a way of saying, you told me to go out on loan to get fitness, or you told me to go out on loan and play, that I'll have a chance of coming back and playing. Whereas now I said, like, this is the opportunity for me to at least be on the bench or even play.
Yeah.
I seen it as a bit of a disrespect to kind of say you're travelling all this way to Carlisle and you put an 18-year-old who hasn't played a league game on the bench, whereas at least you could put me on the bench. So then I didn't really say much. And then the following week we had Hartlepool away, travelled again, was 19th man. And like I said, I'm never one to kind of kick up a fuss, and I always just kept getting on with it, but in my own head thinking, he doesn't want me here. He doesn't want me to play here. Yeah. And then the following season, come back in for pre-season, and Nathan Jones pulls me into the office and says, right, you're on the transfer list and you don't have a squad number. And I just thought, all right, what am I supposed to do now? He said, we can go through the process of like all the stuff that you're supposed to do and mutual agreements. And I said, well, I haven't got anywhere to go. So when it looks like from the outside, like I haven't played for 6-7 months, or he must have been injured, it was just because he didn't want to play me.
It's interesting what you get told, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. Because I even got texts from people in Ireland saying, are you injured this week? How come you're not in the squad? And I was like, well, no. I said, manager just doesn't want me. Like, I can say it openly because it is what happened. I remember that pre-season, I was training with the youth side. So I was training with the under-18s and the first team flew away. And I was meant to be doing pre-season with the youth side, but then the youth side flew away to Italy for 2 weeks. So I was going into the training ground on my own, doing my own pre-season, which I found difficult, but at the same time, knew I had to keep doing it because if a club did come in. So I was lucky that Andy Orford at the time, he was still around the club. So he was taking me for one-on-one sessions, and he was doing like training specific stuff and defending specific stuff, like forward, back, up for your headers, do little shuttle runs. And he was keeping me ticking over. And like I said, he was brilliant with me. Yeah. Because he was keeping me ticking over for when Tranmere phoned, and I went on a 5-day trip to Dublin with them for their pre-season, and that was my first ever bit of pre-season training with a team. Yeah, they weren't able to like get rid of a player for me to come in, so it was difficult for me to sign there. But they were really happy with me, and it was like a really difficult time. And then all of a sudden, I'm training with the youth team. So like when deadline day came and stuff like that, it wasn't that me and Nathan Jones and like argued and like we hated each other and stuff. It was always just he had his business mind on. If he freed up my wages, he could bring in someone he wants. But also on the same time, he did respect me enough that I was still allowed to come in and train. Whereas other managers don't even let you come into the training ground. So I was never someone that was ever a bad egg that would like be horrible around the place. And I'd always come in with a smile on my face. If he said, right, you're with the under-18s today, I'd go over and train with the under-18s. If someone got injured in the first team, he'd say to me, come on over and train with the first team. We need a body. And I'd go over and train and give it me all. I always still had respect for myself, never to like throw in the towel and kind of start kicking up fusses to what I've seen other professionals do when like I've been in other teams. It got to the stage where like obviously my phone wasn't ringing off the hook. I hadn't played in ages, so my phone wasn't ringing non-stop about teams wanting me. So I was kind of like stuck in the middle saying, well, there's no teams that want me, but you're wanting me to leave. And I said, I'm living away from Ireland. And I said, this is the part that I said I tried to get through to him was I said, if I was English and I had a family home, I said I could pack my bags up from this apartment, drop all my clothes and bags into the family home, and I can go around on different trials. But I said, everything that's in this apartment right now is what I own. So I said, I have to bring that from club to club to club, go to hotel to hotel to hotel to try and get a club where I still have a year left here with a bit of security. And in that year, I can try and organise maybe a conference club or someone to take me.
Yeah.
I said, but right now, I'm not in that position to do that. So he did understand me. But also, when his business head was on, he was still trying to say, do you not back yourself getting a club? And I said, well, no, I do back myself. But I said, it's far from security for me. I said, to bring all these suitcases from club to club. And I said, my only move after here, I said, if this doesn't work out, is probably going back to Ireland. I said, because I'm over here on my own. Like I said, we came to an agreement, and I said, like, it's not money that I'm after. I said, you know what I'm like from the year and a half that I've been here. I said, it's not anything that I'm after. I said, I'm not trying to bleed you for money.
Yeah.
I said, I'm doing this because I need security. I said, I need this because I said, this is my dream. I said, if I don't have Luton now and I don't have other clubs wanting me, I said, I can only go home to Ireland. I've got nothing else. So I said, I need this time to try and get something organised. And then they came around, they said, don't worry about it, we'll help you, we'll get you a club, blah, blah. And then that's when I went back to Southport.
Yeah.
And then that's how Southport and that's how Newport came along, because Dino Marmaria, who was the manager of Southport at the time when I went out on loan, he ends up being assistant manager at Newport. Yeah. So when January window came, I texted Dino and said, Dino, Luton are looking to get rid of me. I said, is there any chance I can come down to Newport? And he said, yeah, let me have a word. I'll try and get you in. And then it all just came from that. So then for those last 6 months of the season, being really low and seeing the opposite side of football, then I'm back playing in League Two in the same league like Luton were playing in, and everything kind of works out in the end. So enjoy the highs while you have them, but don't get carried away with them, because then something can only be around the corner and you haven't got a clue. It only takes a change of manager, a change of an opinion. But the one thing I realised is that all football is a game of opinions, where I had one manager who wanted me, another manager who didn't want me, and then you go back to another manager that wants you, because all their opinions are totally different, and you just have to respect everyone. So like I said, I've never fallen out with Nathan Jones. We probably disagreed on a few things as time went on, but I also respect them, because it is a business at the end of the day, and you have to do what's right for the club, and where the direction he was going, I understood it.
No, that's fair enough. But I guess we should move on to the happier times at Newport, as you mentioned. It obviously probably ended slightly earlier than you would have wanted, but the 3 years you were there, probably the most regular football you played in your career, which is exactly what you said you were looking for. And obviously I have to mention that memorable FA Cup run, because it's the thing most associated with Newport in the last couple of years. So how was it like being there, and how was that cup run?
You move away from Luton, so this is like a new lease of life. I'm coming into a new manager who said he wants me. He tells me he's going to like test me really hard and he's going to push me to the limits. And like, they could only sign me on a 6-month basis from January till the end of the season. And then whatever happened after that, whether we got relegated or not, was whether I was going to get another contract. And I'll never forget when that kind of happened, the manager said to me, okay, we'll shake on it right here and right now. He said, from now till the end of the season, he said, we'll pay the rest of your contract like that you were on at Luton. We'll give you this, like the 5-6 months that you had left. But he said, if we get relegated, because this is when they were bottom of the league, they were like so many points off it. He said to me, if we get relegated, it's unfortunate you won't get your off-season pay. If you don't get relegated and we stay up, you'll get paid in your off-season. He said, how's that for a deal? And because I was in no position to kind of negotiate or say, hang on a second, I shook his hand and I said, yeah, I said, that's a great incentive. So I went in and played. I think I missed like 2 games for that whole back end of the season. And the end of that season, score my first professional goal, which saves the club from relegation, keeps the club in the league. I end up getting a new 2-year contract, and then it's like you forget everything that's gone on in the past. And that's why I say football is such an amazing sport, where 1 minute I said you can feel lower than you've ever felt, and then within the space of a couple of months I said you can be at the highest that you've ever felt. And then I say, like, the following season after that, you get like Tottenham in the FA Cup. The following season after that, you get to the 5th round of the FA Cup, and everything was just like a massive snowball effect. And for me personally, to say I was like at the heart of all of that, from like the struggles and that relegation battle to then see where the club is now, and I was at the heart of all of that along with a lot of the lads. It's something where like I take like massive pride out of, because it felt as though I was back to my Derby days again. It was somewhere I was happy. It was somewhere I was comfortable. It was somewhere you felt wanted. The fans loved you. The manager liked me. that transition of coming away from Derby, and then like the ups and downs of Motherwell, Luton, Southport, and then like you finally find that club again that you feel at home at. I said it was like the best feeling ever, and to know like I was part of that, then to be able to say I captained them going out to a playoff final, I captained them going to Wembley, I captained them against Manchester City, and all these different memories that I've had. Like I can speak like of all the Derby memories and go through games and playing in front of 30, 40 odd thousand people, but then the actual hard work that went into this club itself, and to see a club that no one ever really rated, to then put them on the map to where, take for instance, even this season, they go beat Watford and they beat Swansea in the FA Cup or in the Carabao Cup.
Yeah.
But no one bats an eyelid. Everyone just goes, oh, Newport have beaten Watford or Newport have beaten Swansea. Whereas 2-3 years ago, that was seen as a cup upset, whereas now it's seen as, oh, well, it's the normal. So if we had to beat Newcastle, it was, oh, Newport are at it again. They're at the beating Newcastle. To know like that I was part of all of that building, obviously it's come to an end a lot sooner than I would have wanted. But going back to the beginning of all of this, when a doctor told me I could have only had a maximum of 5 years and I got 10 years, it's still like kind of a, no, I'm happy with what I've done. Like I'm proud of my career. I'm proud of everything. I'm proud of what I was able to do at Newport. And you know what? I can sit back and say I've had a 10-year career, whether I've had injuries or whether I've had medical issues. It's a 10-year career to what some people never have. Yeah. And even with the ups and downs or even with anything, when you throw all that to one side, I was treated as a footballer, and that's all I've ever wanted. I didn't want to be a charity case, people giving me opportunity because of what's happened. Yeah. I wanted people to judge me to say, if he's good enough, then play him. If he's not good enough, we don't want him. I didn't want people to have me there because they felt as though they needed to have me.
I mean, I'm sure the Newport fans will agree. I'm sure they would have liked to have still had you now, to be honest. But let's talk about that ending very quickly. Obviously, it's something that wouldn't have been as much of a shock to you as it would have to others, given the history. But the weirdest thing at Newport is that it had happened just before with Fraser Franks as well, something similar. So what was that like at the club? Because obviously, after just getting over that one to then have another, it must have been quite a strange year at the club there.
It was strange for the club, but also in the nicest way possible. Fraser's issue was basically a shock.
Yeah.
Everyone was shocked because no one knew he had a heart problem. No one knew if that would, like, if this was something that he always had or he never had. Like, it was something where it was a shock, where mine wasn't a shock.
Yeah.
Mine was from 16 years old onwards. Year after year, I would get a routine heart scan. So every single season, at the end of that season, I would get a heart scan, which would tell me if I was able to play the following season. So, like, I was relaxed about knowing I needed to retire. Like, I wasn't saying, like, I'm not saying I was happy about it.
Yeah.
Like, because I cried about it and everything.
Yeah.
But I was relaxed about it because I knew it was a decision I had made since I was 16 years old. I knew straight away, the next time I have this, it's the end of my career. I know that, because I don't want to put myself through this year after year and all this kind of stuff. So, like, that side of it was never really a shock. But I think for the club in itself, it was kind of shocked because obviously we just went into a lockdown. There was this pandemic going around. So it was a shock to the club in hindsight, because I remember I found the manager and I found him and he was like, how's everything? And I goes, I've got some bad news for you. And he goes, what? And I remember I just sat there and I just goes, Gaffer, I've got something to tell you. And he goes, what? And I could hear that he kind of like paused to think, what is this he's going to tell me? And I said, Gaffer, I need to retire. And he goes, you're joking. And I goes, no, I need to retire. I said, I've just had a heart scan now. And I said, my valve is back leaking again. I said, I need to retire. And then he kind of just goes, right, let me have a think about this. And then we kind of spoke through it as time went on. And they've been nothing but amazing to me since. I'm doing the commentary on home match days. They bring me in to look over analysis for games. Like, they couldn't do any, like, much more. Like, even today, like, I hit a milestone where it's like 4 months since my operation. And I done my first jog for today, and the physio comes in and helps me with that. Brilliant. And to still have that help and that support, like the club doctor, Daniel Vaughan, if it wasn't for him, me after this operation, like mentally wise, I would have struggled, like even a million times worse than what I have, because he has been like the closest thing medically that I could ever like dream of. Because if I felt any twinges in my chest, or if I felt myself like feeling tight chested, or if I felt myself panicking, all he does is sit me down, we'll chat, he'll check me over, he'll have a listen to everything, he'll check blood pressures. And I'm lucky enough to have that in my corner, that Like, because I know that there's like loads of other people out there that could like have the same operation but don't have that luxury of having a doctor on speed dial to say, Doc, will you look at me? So I know I've been lucky, but without him and his reassurances, I would have been struggling 100 times more. And like I said, I've just been lucky enough to be in the situation that I have been in, and I see myself as being lucky rather than unlucky in a way. I don't see myself as being unlucky and why has this happened to me? I see myself as being lucky that I've been able to have a 10-year career. I've been able to come across so many different contacts along the way and so many great people and so many different things along the way that now, like, my career's come to an end. People, like, over the years, and I never realised that, like, I never thought my career was anything special. Like, I've always wanted, because I've always tried to hold myself at a high standard to say, I want the best for myself. I want to play in the Premier League. I want to play international football. I want to do all these different things like any other footballer.
Yeah.
But because I was at Derby, I always felt as though maybe I do have a chance at this. If I do really well, maybe I do have a chance. If I get promoted with Newport, maybe I do have a chance. And I always lived on that maybe. Now, when that kind of gets taken away from you, I sit here and go, well, do you know what? I gave it everything. I gave me all. I don't look back in any regrets. I don't look back in any anger. I look and just basically say, do you know what? I'm lucky to have the career I've had, medical issues or not. And that's like the only way that kind of got me through it. And even till this day now, like, I still look and say, do you know what? I'm still 27, like going on 28. I still could do whatever I wanted with my life. But the fact of still being in a good position, of still being in football, going back on the fact of saying, I never thought my career was anything, because you see it being so good, as in you're at Derby, everything's going amazing, you're getting called into Irish 21 squads, you have managers talking about you, you have people saying how great things are. And then I seen the opposite side of being all the way down in the conference with Southport, and you think, I didn't fulfill what I wanted personally. But at the same time, once I came out with the, like, saying I was retired, Derby fans tweeting me, Derby staff members that I worked with tweeting me, Motherwell supporters, Motherwell people in the club, some Luton fans, even though things didn't work out. I had Nathan Jones who messaged me. I had Gary Bowyer, a manager I never even played under, messaged me. Stuart McCall, Nigel Clough phoning me. I have all Newport fans. So when I start seeing the response from it, I start thinking, I gained a lot more respect in my career than I ever expected.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave me a kind of new lease of life to think, I actually did have a good career, rather than thinking I didn't fulfill and thinking it wasn't as great as I thought it was. I actually look back at it now and go, do you know what? I actually did make an impression, and I did make an impact on certain teams I was at. Whether it was a good impact or not, people are remembering me. And that's all I ever wanted, was to be known for football.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, I was able to see that I was, as I said, made everything so much nicer.
Certainly a good career, and we'll finish off with some quick fire questions, which will probably prove just that. The first thing we're going to ask, which we always do, is the best player you ever played with and against, and I'm sure you'll have some names here.
Oh, best player I've played with, there's a few. Like, I'm going to have to throw his name in, because, like, I've always said it, like, as a midfielder in himself, Jeff Hendrick, how he's gone on to bigger and better things now. Like, me and him have always been great mates, but he's, like, been a midfielder that you always knew was going to go on and do really well. Chris Commons, training with him each day and playing games. Even Paddy McCourt, like, honestly, no word of a lie. The only way I was able to describe him to people, like, people are like, is he actually as good as what, like, he looks at Celtic? Like, he's meant to be unbelievable. And the only way I ever described him was, he's the closest thing to Lionel Messi I'll ever get to train with. Like, technically, everything about him, like how he glides past players, his football and brain, everything. He never looked quick, but was so quick with the ball. Was always 2-3 steps ahead of everybody before you even knew what you were going to do to tackle him. He already knew how he was taking it on. Even Alan Sheehan and people like that, like him as a centre back, he was great. Just from times at Derby, like Richard Keogh, like there's loads of names I can keep throwing out. And then the best player to play against, when I was only 17, 18, Ricky Lambert was really good. But then obviously with the Man City game and stuff like that, like David Silva, like, you just couldn't get near him. Like, he would drop and slightly play up front, so you'd step out to mark him and he'd just wander off somewhere else where you couldn't go. And then before you know it, he's in behind, he's playing passes. Gabriel Jesus, Sane, like that whole starting 11, I could turn around and say they were unbelievable. Like, I remember I played against Celtic and they had that John Guidetti up front.
Oh, yeah.
and they had Anthony Stokes and Virgil van Dijk played that game, and they were all people that you look at and say, well, you know what, like the names you can look back on and go, like, I've played against these people. Like it was great, like to share the pitch with people like that. You look at all the big games we've played in. I even say, even till this day, when we played against Leicester and the Royas Vassell, they had Nugent up front, Konchesky, Ishmael Miller for Nottingham Forest. Kevin Phillips, when he was at Blackpool, played against him, and his movement in the box like taught me so much, where you can't take your eye off him for a second, because he's one of them where if the ball sails over your head and as you turn around, you know he's standing there waiting to tap it in.
Yeah.
Like just all different things like that. And sometimes, like I say, even with talks like this, it's great to like talk back on a career that I had, because everything's been clouded at the moment with obviously what's gone on in the like retirement. But to be able to look back on like some of the stuff that like are the people I've played with or the people that I've played against, like it sometimes blows my mind sometimes to think to myself, you know what, it actually was great, and I loved every minute of it. And like I said, like I'm still that kind of kid that still lives that dream where I'm like, you know what, I can't believe all this. Like I've played at Wembley, I've done all these different things, but like I still look at games now and think, oh, you know what, I'd still love to play. But so I'm still kind of stuck in that middle ground right now.
There's a fair few current and former pros that would like to have been able to give those lists of players. So I think you'll make a few people jealous more than anything else. Let's go for the final one, which is your favourite ever game. So I'll let you have two because you're a former pro. You can have your favourite game as a player and your favourite game as a fan.
See, that on the spot, I don't think there's ever one I could pick. Because right, I'd pick one from Derby where we were down to 10 men. We were playing Nottingham Forest away, and it was my first ever local derby. It was at the City ground. Frank Fielding got sent off in the first minute, went down to 10 men, 1-0 down. And it was my first ever, and you're just thinking this day is going to get so worse. And then we won that game 2-1. It was one of the best days that I've had as like a derby player, to think. Like that's a game that's going to go down in like history, where they're like, oh, well, we beat them with 10 men. Who played in that team? And I was one who played in that team, like loved every minute of it. I'll go through each team. At Motherwell, when we played Celtic, we got a 1-1 draw. Yeah. Loved that. That was like one of my highlights, because I always said I'd love to go watch a game in Celtic Park, and my first time in Celtic Park was actually playing there. So it was like brilliant. Yeah, it was like brilliant. And then I'd say Luton, probably my favourite game was Stoke at home. Yeah. Like I know I played centre midfield that day, but to get 1-1 in like the 92nd minute, take them all the way to extra time, take it all the way to penalties. It could have went in any different direction. Yeah. But the atmosphere that night, like I couldn't, like you can't fault the Luton fans for when they are on song. Like it was unbelievable. Like I loved it. Southport, I just loved the whole like experience of being there. Like my first kind of career goal was against Welling, so I kind of like enjoyed that. And then at Newport, so many games to choose from. The Great Escape, like that last day of the season goal, obviously is going to be like the main one. But then the captain against Man City, like you're walking out or you're walking into the referee's room, waiting on their captain to come in, and then you see their captain come in and it's David Silva. So I'm there standing next to David Silva thinking, hang on a second, what am I doing in the same change room as this, let alone the same pitch? That in itself was like just one amazing experience. But then also getting to captain them to walk out at Wembley. And I know it didn't go quite to plan and I got sent off and stuff like that. And like I'll always kind of look back at that and think, what if I didn't get sent off? Would I have been able to be in that position to head that away that came in for that cross? But also, no one will take away that I got the captain aside walking out at Wembley, and I loved every minute of it. Even though, like, obviously, as you say, I did get sent off and it kind of dampened it. Like, the day couldn't have gone any better, to an extent of, like, I played well in the whole 89 minutes. But then 2 yellow cards kind of cost you, where I learned from the second one, where you get too tight, someone else is a bit more cleverer, they throw themselves around you, and it looks like you've dragged everyone down. So you played the game well. But then the first one, in my eyes and a lot of other people's eyes, shouldn't have been a yellow card. So there's loads of ways of looking back at it. But for a day in itself, to have me dad there, some of my friends there, to have people watching from home, for me to walk out as captain at Wembley, like it was like one of the proudest things I've done.
It's a brilliant way to finish. Obviously, plenty of good memories in your career, and good to see you today going back for your first jog, and obviously still involved with Newport a little bit as well. So we wish you the best for the future, and thanks a lot for joining us. So appreciate you.
Nice one, cheers. Thanks very much.